Welcome to the Red Dice Diaries. This podcast is a rambling journey through the wonderful world of RPGs from the viewpoint of a long-time GM and player. The music at the start of this podcast was Nightmare by Alexander Nakarada and is used under Creative Commons license. Okay, so I'm going to start this episode by answering a few voicemails that I've received. So let's crack on with those.
Hey John, it's Cody with the No Save for You podcast. Hey man, I'm really enjoying your session one episode. I'm not all the way through it yet, but yeah, I really like the style you went with. Instead of just playing back all of the audio, you're kind of narrating it. It's nice, and yeah, I'm looking forward to the rest of the episode. Just thought I'd give you a call and let you know I liked it. So take it easy, and I'll catch you around.
That was Cody M from the No Save for You podcast. Thanks very much for getting in touch, Cody, and for your kind words. Glad you're enjoying the first episode of the Thousand Landscape. Yeah, I think the sort of style of abbreviating the sections and narrating them seems to be working reasonably well. It takes a little bit of time to do in the edit, but in some cases, it's allowed me to cut out a lot of extraneous stuff and chop it down to from like 3-4 hours to like an hour and a half, etc., which makes it a lot easier for people to listen to. Because let's face it, we're all pushed for time. We all have things we need to be getting on with. And it also means that I don't have to have my computer be just set aside for like hours with like all of my bandwidth being chewed up by uploading to YouTube or to Anchor or stuff like that. So I think it's a bit of a winner on all fronts, albeit, like I say, it does take a little while to put the edit together. But glad you're enjoying it, Cody. And I think from the numbers of people who've been listening to it on the podcast and on YouTube, it certainly seems to be working really well. And it's something I'm going to push on with in the future and hopefully start throwing in a few more things like sound effects and stuff like that as we go on. But we'll see how that develops. So thanks again for the call, and I'll catch you soon, Cody.
Hi, Froth here, listening to your podcast. I enjoyed this one. Just wanted to say I thought the idea that the character didn't realize they're an android, they had to be injured before they realized. I thought that was really cool. So enjoyed listening. Sometimes like the super longer ones, like 2 hours, I don't always have time to listen. So it was cool to hear some of the shorter stuff too and just hear what's going on in your game. So I just wanted to let you know I enjoyed it. Thanks.
Hi, Froth. Thanks very much for getting in touch. Glad you like the idea of the character as like the sort of secret Cylon, I suppose, but he's even unaware of it themselves, which I suppose is how Cylons work on the sort of reimagined Battlestar Galactica. But yeah, it was again something that just came about as a result of me having one of these foci to pick in Stars Without Number and not really having any ones that really spoke to me, but they handily put like a unique foci where it's basically discuss what you want with the GM and you hack out between yourselves what it is that is the game result of that's going to be, and then you go from there. And I love anything that encourages discussion between the GM and the player, albeit I normally tend to be on the GM side, so it was a bit different for me being on the player side of that. But I think that helped because obviously I understand where the sort of GM's coming from, and I wouldn't want to do anything to ruin the game or sort of make it difficult for people. In fact, I wanted to use it to try and bring someone else into the game a bit more, but it seems to be working pretty well. We've got some great plot coming off from it, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes, including the next session where we're sort of going to like my character's alleged homeworld to try and track down if any of her background is real. Was she based on a real person? Was it all just made up? We don't really know. And that's exciting for me as a player. And it's also as much as it's unnerving for my actual character. Glad you're enjoying some of the slightly shorter podcast entries. I'm hoping to continue doing those and intersperse them with my longer ones, because how you're preaching to the choir when you're talking about not having enough time to listen to them all. I'd love to be able to listen to like a lot more of people's podcasts and comment on them, but with game planning, recording my own podcast, doing like social media, trying to get into like writing and stuff, and also having all the non-gaming related stuff to do in lives, I appreciate that it's just not possible. But thanks for getting in touch, Froth. Catch you soon.
Hi John, Colin, Spike Pit. Just calling in with some encouragement really. I enjoyed your off the cuff episode. I look forward to hearing more. I think they're a really good way to get some insight out to the listeners. Some people that are new to the hobby could benefit from your words of wisdom. You're an experienced online gamer. And on that subject, I look forward to our Thousand Lands game later on today. Anyway, keep up the good work, man. And like I say, catch you later.
That was Colin from Spike Pit. Thanks very much, Colin, for the encouragement. It's very much appreciated. Yeah, I'm certainly hoping to be able to do some more of the sort of day-to-day regular stuff as much as time allows. And I'm hoping now that I'm sort of slowly mastering, like doing a few bits and pieces, just using my phone, it'll make it a lot easier to do that. Now, for anyone who's listening, because this message was left like a day ago that Colin left it on my Anchor, the session that he's actually talking about is the one that I'm going to be speaking about in a few minutes, involving the Skylord, or Robot God, as it's called in the Ascent of the Robot God one-page dungeon by John Love and Matthew Siegel. So I'm going to speak about that in a minute, but everyone seemed to enjoy it. I certainly enjoyed running it, even though it was a bit of a sort of an injection of like sci-fi, I suppose you could call it, into our regular fantasy game, but it was certainly something interesting and a bit different. So anyway, without further ado, thanks very much, Colin, for your message again, and we'll crack on with the main discussion of this episode. Just doing a little bit of the daily podcast stuff. Ran a enjoyable episode of our Thousand Lands campaign last night. The players journeyed to a sort of strange village where there was this huge statue, this huge like robot thing towering over the top of it. And every year the village had a festival where they send people inside the bowels of this malfunctioning robot, and eventually some of them come out with treasures or some of them perish, in which point the villagers believe that their faith obviously wasn't strong enough. Now, this was something that I found online, and it's a one-page dungeon, as in the one-page dungeon competition, which you can Google and find out about online. Essentially, a load of people creating sort of dungeons that fill up one side of A4 that can easily be dropped into different campaigns. This one was created by John Love and Matthew Siegel, and it basically gives you a drawing of this robot sat in front of this mountain, details on the sort of weird malfunctioning drones and the various different areas of the robot, the ship, effectively, the mech, whatever you want to call it. And I thought that was really interesting, and I like the little sort of fantasy village that's like lying at its feet, and the idea that this village has this yearly festival where champions are chosen to attempt to retrieve gifts from within. It really captured that sort of gonzo flavour that some of the older modules in D&D had, where they played a little bit fast and loose with the whole idea of sci-fi and fantasy as distinct genres, and they sort of tended to mix them up a little bit, which I've always really enjoyed, stepping outside the sort of default idea that fantasy's fantasy, or you've always got to stick with swords and sorcery, or you've always got to have dark fantasy and never the twain shall meet. I really like the idea of just occasionally, and I'm not talking about all the time, I love the idea of occasionally mixing it up a little bit. And I'm not saying that my Thousand Lands campaign is going to have sort of mecha pilots storming about everywhere, and I've very much pitched the giant robot as a sort of defunct or no longer functioning remnant of this ancient mage / sorcerer king war that happened in the past of my session. Now, I'm really hoping to use some of the more of the one-page dungeons and maybe even submit some in the future, because I think they're really great, especially for like a hex crawl campaign like my own, where it's very player-led. The players can do whatever they want. They're free to pick up on whatever plots they want and ignore whatever ones they don't want to look into. So, for instance, they originally spotted this statue because it was on the other side of a range of hills. They saw like the the moonlight at first glinting off the head of this silver statue, and went closer to investigate, where they discovered the village full of these like malformed, war-scarred people who had this strange, almost cargo cult developed around this Sky Lord, as they called it in my session. But because it was a one-page dungeon that I just pulled out and I'd adapted a little bit, if the players had have gone, no, we don't fancy that, and they'd have just chosen to move on, no harm done. If they wanted to wander around the wilderness and just do some random encounters and do whatever, no harm done. If they want to go and explore something out, I can pull out a one-page dungeon or some of my own planning for other areas, and happy days. Whereas I know certainly in previous games I've tended to feel that, like, if you spend hours and hours and hours prepping for a particular area and then the players ignored it, you almost feel a bit sort of jilted because you've put all that effort in and it doesn't get taken up. And to be honest, I don't like feeling like that, and I don't like sort of begrudging my players their ability to wander around, because especially in a hex scroll campaign, I like to allow the players in my game freedom to have their characters wander around wherever they will. If they suddenly go like, oh, we're going to go and see what's at that mountain over there, yeah, it's handy for me to have a few things ready, just in case. But if they don't go there, I don't want to feel like I've got to try and steer them or railroad them in that direction. So I think the one-page dungeons are great for that. I really enjoyed the session we ran last night. I was really glad to have a group of players who just sort of ran with the strange semi sort of sci-fi elements that were inserted in, including like a juice box that healed them, these strange metallic spider drones inside it, huge gallons of like crud encrusted oil, stuff like that. And I think it would be easy in a game if you do a bit of a change of pace. Some players feel a little bit annoyed about it. You've signed on for a fantasy game and suddenly there's a bit of like sci-fi, like polluting the mix, as it were. But I'm lucky enough to have a group of players who like kept an open mind, went into it. I did tell them, like, look, it's not going to be a thing that happens all the time, but I thought it was a nice way of letting them know that there are like potentially other elements going to be in this game, because I'm sort of magpieing things from all over the place. Now, there's been some sort of jokey talk about them seeing if they could get the mech working or using it as a fortress. That's something they could look into. There's also various other like plot threads, like these people in like a sky city that was hinted at. But if they wanted to entirely ignore that and never go back to that area again, that's also grand with me. But I'm really enjoyed the session, and I'm looking forward to seeing what my players get up to next time. So that's it for this episode. If you have any questions or suggestions for things you'd like to see in the podcast in future, please either email them to reddicediaries@gmail.com or drop me a voicemail at Anchor. Until I see you next time, wherever you're playing, take care and enjoy yourselves.